All right, all right. We're back. We're live. And let me pull up my screen just in case y'all who don't know who we are. Uh, we're Women in Linux. You can find us at womeninlinux.org. You can also find us on here on YouTube, but we're Women in Linux everywhere. If you have not ever connected with us, you can connect with us on Slack by hitting connect here and drop in your email address and then hop over to Slack using the Slack app or the desktop app and then go from there. Another way that you can also be a part of our community is you can shop with us. That's right, people. You can get your own merch from us. This is not the only merch. Steve has more, but here's our 5th year anniversary where we have just different things. If you click on all products, you get stickers. We've added some new stuff. Get it before the year is out because once the year is over, it's a wrap. We won't have this back because you know what? It'll be a new year. All right. And last but not least, you can always donate. But guess what? You don't have to just donate with your money. You can donate with your time. What we tend to like to have is people come on, give their wisdom. Also, as well, if you want to teach a class or if you just want to talk or you just want to come by and say, hey, we got jobs out here. We need people to get employed. Feel free to stop by. We can't do it all by ourselves. This is a community. It is a community build. Speaking of a community build, today we got none other. Cheers, everybody! Cheers! Ah. You got Mr. Tim Serewicz, and make sure I said your name
Oh,
correctly.
absolutely.
I will butcher a name by. I'm not trying to, but I will. And I want to welcome you back from I think it's been like 3 years now since we did that
Wow.
last one. It's
Wow.
been 3 years. Well, we
Maybe.
communicate. Yeah, we communicate off and on LinkedIn and so forth. But man, it's been a minute, and when we met in Vancouver. We just had the conversation about us meeting in Vancouver, and we were talking about CKA. And the CKD wasn't even developed yet. We were talking about and what does the state of Kubernetes looks like, the study, the whole nine. We did the podcast as well too. And so now we're here and let's just open up with and get people familiar with who you are. Even you at the Linux Foundation right now. Let's talk about it. So give people a little info about who you are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's great to be back. It's hard to believe it's been that long. That's kind of amazing. But I've had a little time warp lately, so it is great to be back and to talk to you again. A little background on me. Well, I'm currently the training program director for the Linux Foundation. And the Linux Foundation, we are about Linux, of course. A lot of people don't realize we're really about open source. So I believe it's up to 700 projects are now underneath the umbrella of the Linux Foundation. So Linux still, Kubernetes, as you mentioned, CNCF was a really big part of it. So anything cloud focused, but we have a wide range of things from automotive grade Linux
Hmm.
to Academy software. So how they make movies, all that, the software they use to make
Yeah,
movies.
I
So
saw that.
wide ranging stuff. My part of it is in training. So I'm responsible for content. And that's both the free content we have that you go to our website and you get free classes. We have some stuff on edX, again, free classes. They're not just like a first chapter, it's the whole thing. So it might be a little lightweight, but it's enough to get you well started. There's labs and so forth. And this is what we do. We're a nonprofit. So we want you to use this stuff. So we give away a lot of free stuff. So take advantage of that. And then I'm also responsible for our paid content. We have self-paced and instructor led. So I get to deal with instructors around the world, and which is great most often. But being awake at 2 a.m. to talk to somebody in a foreign country sometimes gets old. So there's that. But and in addition to content and trainers, I get to evangelize a little bit about open source and Linux, which I'm passionate about. So I really appreciate you having me here to preach a little bit about how great it is.
Oh man, we have to that with that kind of introduction. We have to get you on one meetup, or maybe it may not be in the afternoon. We do this. We do have a Saturday show that we do, one at 11:30 and one at 2 o'clock. Where the 2 o'clock one is How We Linux, where I kind of go more into a deep dive on like, hey, Starlink uh, launched satellites and they're all ran on Linux. Like talking about like where the touch points of Linux is. We even had a live last night, so I know people are like, please don't let it be 5 hours like it was last night. No, it's not going to be 5 hours. We don't have that kind of time today. But last night we were talking about, I talked about how BMW is looking for Linux people, right? And looking for DevSecOps. Same way with IBM looking for Linux people on their DevOps using quantum computing on their quantum computing cloud. So it's so many different touch points with Linux. And speaking of Linux, Kubernetes as well too. So you handling content, and know you've written curriculum for the CKA. Did you do the CKD too?
I did, as well as the CKS. That's our
Okay.
newest one. That's our newest one, indeed.
Now,
All three.
what
I
is
still
this?
maintain all three.
Well, what's the CKS for?
So CKS is a certified Kubernetes security specialist,
Gotcha.
which is actually CKSS, but it's just CKS in
I
this case,
got
but
you.
it's security focused. Exactly.
Okay. And within that, I'm just gonna go out on a limb here without even looking it up. We're talking network security, uh, possibly even the container security,
Mhm.
and then probably identity security as well too. Not just the namespaces, but the identity as well too.
Absolutely.
All right. All
Yeah,
right.
you're right on it. You're good. Yeah, down the line. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. The goal when I created the course, and my goal was to have a one-stop shop to get you started with security. Security is such a huge topic that it'd be unfair to try to put it all together, especially to get it done in a short period of time. But we wanted somebody who goes through this class not only to pass the exam, of course, but to have a really great start. And so I cover in the course start to finish. So we actually start talking about physical security
Okay.
and like who really has access to your stuff, and then we work through operating system, firmware, then where what's the lineage of your software, where's it coming from, if you're developing
Mm-hmm.
it yourself, what's your pipeline. So
Right.
are your developers writing code that might have something like a malicious library they don't even know? So we
Right.
do static and dynamic analysis of containers. And then we talk about a little bit about machine intelligence and artificial intelligence to do behavioral analytics and so forth. So it's really it's as much as we can and in a short period of time, we're trying to get you started so that you can look at your entire production environment and at least say, these are my threats. This is how I can get started on the journey. And we cover, I believe it's 15 different tools that you can
Okay.
use. Here's Tracy to look at your dynamic workload, and here's I'm going to blank on that Trio for looking at a static container.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to do it from start to finish. It's not exhaustive necessarily. You still have more work to do, but you could walk into a place and at least see the major threats.
Right. So basically, if you were uh, a Kubernetes person, when I say a Kubernetes person, say you're handling infrastructure, but you have some have some concerns about security. You can walk in, take the class, and then start at least doing at a minimum implementing those things until maybe you built out your security team, or maybe you had someone come in and do pen testing on your infrastructure. You at least have a basic foundation of that
Exactly.
before that gets done. All right.
It,
All right.
we,
Cool.
what we find is a lot of people are cognizant of the stuff that touches their particular job, but they don't see the next two near them. And we've had
Mm-hmm.
some really big issues. I don't want to pick on any companies, but there's been some pipeline companies and some software companies that have had some major hacks, and they could have been prevented.
Right.
And so if you take this course, you will be thinking about, okay, I did my part, but what about who feeds me and who I feed? What's watching that part of it? So it's meant to be encompassing, definitely.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the articles that came out from Fed Scoop was talking about how the DoD is trying to create an AI and was the AI ML and security pipeline for the supply chain, because they're worried about again, the SolarWinds hack. Like
Exactly.
how do we make sure that RPM or that package that you say that you said that is secure is actually secure for me, and that was a breakdown there, and that brought up a big like question mark, really a black eye on how how do we go forward with that verification, with OSCAP and other tools and stuff, and verifying RPMs and so forth. But if it's coming from the vendor, and this is one of the meetings that I was in on, it was like, if it's coming from the vendor, how do we know that the vendor didn't get hacked? All right,
Yep.
where's that level of confidence at when it comes to that? So it's been a ongoing issue there.
It is, and it's not going to end. And this class will give you the tools. And we do a culture talk. I have a chapter that we talk about culture an awful lot, and it's how do you check for vulnerabilities. But basically, don't just trust. And what are the tools to test? Because
Right.
we're kind of too trusting. You want to trust everybody, but that's why a smart bad actor will find your vulnerability and they say, oh, they're not looking over here. There's a door that's unguarded. There's software you don't check. What a better place to go.
Right. So now we talked about the CKS.
Mhm.
What is new in the land and the realm of Kubernetes from, and I don't want to say 3 years ago because that's a lot to cover
It is.
in the 3 years, but let's just say in this year, let's say since the pandemic, right? What have you seen with from the pandemic hitting, and now that ramp up where people are working remotely, Kubernetes, we're talking edge, you're talking about microcontrollers and stuff. What are you seeing in your world that we could my goal, let me preface this, my goal is to get people to understand, like, okay, you learn Linux, but then you learn an automation tool, and Kubernetes is your next thing. What are you looking for when you get into that? We talked about security, so that's one aspect, but hey, there are other things. So give us the
Absolutely.
tea.
Sure. Security, I would say, if, because I also try to encourage people like, well, if you want a decent job, this is where I'd focus. Absolutely. Security is going to be big. You've probably talked about this, but the government is spending big money. Big tech companies have talked about spending billions of dollars on this. So that's going to be the gold rush, is in the next year, security will be the gold rush area. And I would focus there. Other than that, though, there's a lot happening. It's growing. I would say big trends. So pretty high level stuff. I would say Kubernetes is moving from the data center. So up until recently, the focus of the developers has been on making it work and then making it work well. And I think we're there. It's mature, it's strong, it has great features. Security is now being, anytime people catch up with security and documentation, that's usually only happens when the main product is actually pretty good. So it's a good sign now that we're stable. But the movement I see, as you mentioned, like IoT, we're seeing that's now, okay, how do I apply this other places? So they're K3s. So Kates, of course, is how they spell Kubernetes. So there's the number 3S. K3s is about microservices running Kubernetes. And there's something called Ketchup, which is K3SUP, which is even smaller. And these are all lightweight Kubernetes for like embedded systems. So your refrigerator might run Kubernetes here. And absolutely, like your car. There's a couple people who are talking about putting Kubernetes in your car, because it's the orchestration tool. And let's say you have about 15 computers in a typical modern car. Well, each one would have their own VM or their own container running it, and Kubernetes would be the orchestration tool that makes it happen. So we're seeing Kubernetes move from the data center to everywhere, to the edge, as you're saying. So the edge itself, there's new projects that are just about that, is saying, how do I take something that was meant for large scale, but I like its Lego-like format, where I don't have a model to reference that a little bit. Legacy software servers, when you built it, it was like a model airplane. When you're done, it looks like the cover of the box. The reason that people love Kubernetes is options. It's a stack of Legos. You stack it together. You can swap out one Lego, and the rest stay where they are. So that's why we like it. It's fast, it leverages containers, and it's all about orchestration. Well, now they're saying, well, it's kind of big. How do I get that kind of flexibility and agility everywhere else? And that's what we're really seeing. So edge devices, appliances, satellites, cars, anything that you need to have agility and dependability is where you're seeing it, because the concept of the containers, if it fails, fail early, fail often, kill it and start a new one. And so instead of putting like, oh, it has to run forever no matter what, now I can say, no, let's build it the other way. Let's build it expecting it to die. We're going to kill it and then replace it. So now if version 1 isn't good, I throw out version 2 and it propagates across my house and my toaster gets upgraded or something to right. the new container. But it's that it means that your model has changed. The whole paradigm has changed towards that flexibility, and makes it actually, it's a pain to get there, but once you're there, you're so agile and you can change things instead of having to do a physical replacement. You expect the change.
Right. And I know that we're seeing it more in cars. I mean, we've been seeing this in cars for a while, but not only that, I was reading an article the other day about the advertising that's coming, and the security of cars as well too, coming down. Like, hey, we're actually pushing. I think it was Amazon is getting into the cars as far as security and advertising and so forth. So I'm curious. I know they just created a TV. They just create their own TV. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's not already has happened that we'll see K3s in a TV to learn more about your habits and so forth. Right? Not just from the Netflix standpoint, but from the data standpoint of what you normally watch, the channels, the so forth, and feeding that back into your email and advertising all the way back down to your phone. Right? I can see that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's the Roku model. If you buy Roku, which is a digital tool for TV, and you're buying it for the price of hardware. So you're like, well, how does this work? If I'm just, it's $100 for whatever the hardware is. Where are they making their money? Oh, it's because they monitor everything you do, every station, every channel, and they've monetized it. So that's, as you said, Amazon's like, well, why are we giving it away to Roku if we can put it in your TV? And the smart remote. Well, I don't have the remote just listening to you the whole time and checking it, and I can just do it that way. I don't even have to own your stuff. What's the one thing you always have in the room, always in your hand? The remote control. And so I think there's a lot of trends towards monetization of the people, which is kind of, as a security person, kind of like spooky, but I get why they're doing it. Even I don't have to buy it, as right. But it is showing up more places, both for flexibility as well as monetization. The Tesla, if you think about it, they ship the car to you, and then when you want the upgrade, they unlock a feature. And normally with a traditional model like that, you'd have to take the car in and have them put something in there. And now, it's basically, well, we'll just ship it with everything. We'll turn it on when you decide you'd like that feature. That kind of model as well is to make it easy. So you park near your house Wi-Fi, your car updates, you get that new feature, your laptops, your cell phones, all your equipment. If you have a flexibility built in, which Kubernetes really allows for, then not only does it update, but it fixes itself. It's like, oh, I have the smallest problem. Now let's terminate the whole software. Just kill everything. We'll load a new one. We'll move on. As long as that little core piece is okay of your orchestration, and we're now there, it is that durable, then the rest is quite easy. And a very small percentage, it will break, like the actual Bluetooth headphones. They'll just break. Well, fine. If I only have to replace 10, it's worth it. It's still a huge profit motive to replace the couple times that my orchestration software fails versus how many times I can replace everything else and nobody even notices.
Right. And as I was sitting here thinking, I was also thinking about how Kubernetes plays in the sports arena. When we're talking about fan engagement in the NFL, and now when you go into the stadium, it's always it's alerts everywhere. I don't know if people realize this in the stadium. your alerts are everywhere. The food, you on the camera, around the stadium, another game. It's almost like, for me, and I know the NFL and ESPN, they're all big into Kubernetes as well too.
Absolutely.
Like from a fan engagement standpoint. So when we're talking about Kubernetes, we're not just talking about just the cards. There's an abstraction, I guess you could say, that is missing, that people don't see when we're talking about it. Now, go ahead. You was going
Oh,
to
I was
say
gonna
something.
say, yeah, it's not just it's there's also good like stuff that I would like. For example, IoT devices like your smoke detector. If you think about it, like my house, I have 11 smoke detectors in my house. Whoever put them everywhere. I know because I have to replace little batteries. But right now, they're just a dumb device after beeps at 2 a.m. every time. But now I could have it tell me that your battery is going to go, and it goes to my phone.
Hmm.
It could keep track of my air quality now and say, we got to open a window. We got to turn a fan on. You have too much CO2. We could have all of these things happen, and it could be updated when something new comes along. So, we heard glass break. It could be integrated to my security system and turn
Hmm.
on all the alarms. So all of that becomes possible. Like, people don't realize how much the Internet of Things really becomes everything. If you look around, if it has a battery in your room, it could become part of the Internet of Things, and some form of Kubernetes could be running it or running on it.
Right. And I think we had someone mention this before, K3s on a watch, when we're talking about that, but not even just on a watch. I wouldn't be surprised if we get K3s in our headphones, because I have a set of headphones. I would not be surprised if I got K3s in my headphones here, to talk, just to see what kind of music I'm listening to, and then Apple offers up, hey, it's notice this is your playlist. We've generated a playlist for you, and then go from there. Right? I wouldn't be surprised. Somebody was asking, how long does it take to finish the CKA? The CKA, and I think that's the exam, but I think that's the exam and the class.
Right, right. So the course, the CKA course, is 4 days of material, and that's pretty close to a full 4 days with labs and lecture. The exam is a 2-hour exam, and there are some people, which I'm very envious of, that can sit the class, take the exam the next day, and pass. I am not that person. I typically suggest, if you're anything like me, you should give yourself 2 or 3 weeks. And in the course itself, and even if you don't take the class, let me tell you how to practice for the exam. Go to cncf.io, find the certification tab. There's a curriculum overview, and that's a bullet point list of all of the items on the exam. Those bullet points are literally what you're going to find. So underneath each bullet point, go to Kubernetes.io and look up the YAML, look up the steps to do whatever that is. A key thing here is there's going to use the term understand. Understand config maps. Understand something. They don't mean understand like I could find it on a page. Understand means mastery. I can create it. I can destroy it. I can integrate it. I can fix it. So there's like 10 understand words. Those are big words there. So go through the whole list of bullet points and build your YAML so you know exactly what that looks like, where you can get access to it easy, and then practice doing it in 2 hours. All of those bullet points in 2 hours. And then so you can actually do this on your own. Now, I'm not somebody who can do it in a week. For me, it's more like a month, but that's the kind of process that I would follow. And that also read through what you're showing now, which is the handbook, because it tells
Hmm.
you what web pages you can use during the exam. And that's good to know where to find your materials. So the exam itself is 2 hours. I would say a reasonably a person with decent skills at learning could probably study for approximately a month and pass the exam. Yeah, so
And
that
we're on 1.22, right?
yes, 122 is out. It updates every 3 months approximately. So we keep up with I'm rewriting the courses all the time because it changes all the time. So that's just it. The speed of technology is going even faster. They're actually slowing down. This is the nice thing for me. They're slowing down the release from every 3 months to every 4 months. So I get an extra 3 weeks to to catch a breather because I have to update 3 classes every 3 months at least. So those are the bullet points right there. So go through each of those bullet points, and from the other handbook, the URLs that this are allowed resources during the exam. And effectively, it's just practicing it. It's nothing you can't learn. It's just trying to remember all of these things in 2 very stressful hours. That's the hard part.
Right. Don't refresh your screen, right?
Exactly. Right. And a new feature that we have, it's relatively new since the last time we spoke for sure, is we now have an exam simulator. That's part of when you sign up for the exam. There's a simulator. Now, what I always like to caution people, this is not the questions on the exam. Instead, it gets you used to the exam environment. It's a weird environment to have a browser with somebody staring at you and listening to you, and you have to clear off your desk. We jump through all these hoops to keep people from cheating. And it's really stressful. It's not our normal life, that you're in this quiet chamber and no paper. It's weird for me. And so this exam simulator allows you to kind of get used to it and get, okay, it's one less stress, because you don't need any more stress during an exam. So make your life as easy as possible, practice it, know where all your YAML files are, understand how to do those steps, get the bullet points, write them out, write the steps underneath. And I'm a flashcard person, so I have to see it over and over again before it sinks into my head. And basically by doing that and having your YAML ready to go, or being able to access it real quick, then chances are you'll do okay on the exam.
Right. And I think someone had asked, what was a new objective added to the CKA on September the 28th?
Oh, I'd have to look again. I don't remember off the top of my head. The CKA, did we just update? Which is the one that we just updated? Is that the CKA or CKAD?
It's the one. See, this one was the CKAD 4 days ago, and 4 months ago there was the CKA from this GitHub repo I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think the CKAD just updated, and or is in the process, like very recently is going to be updating. The CKAD, we're adding a init script so that you can choose which of your containers are going to boot. Helm is going to be added to CKAD, and man, I'm blanking on the third thing. This is the problem when you have 3 classes that you're constantly rewriting. They all blend together, and if I'd happily write it down at some point. I'm blanking on what it is off the top of my head.
Now, quick question: when you're writing the class, are you getting input from others to help you write the course, or employers to write? You're just rewriting based upon what's coming out in Kubernetes, and then you have to practice it and play with it, and you're like, oh, that needs to be added.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love more help. And, there's people who say, like, for example, some stuff changes. The software changes. We don't use demos. We use live software. So we go to the internet, we pull it like you would at work, because we want to emulate that. So you have those skills. Mm-hmm. And sometimes stuff breaks. And so we have forums. So when you take a class, you get access to the self-paced course, and there's forums that go along with it. And on those forums are the people who know me or send me an email, and they say, Tim, it's broken. And I'm like, really? Dang, work yesterday. And I'll get in there and I'll fix it. And that's why, like, the previous version, the CKAD, I think I updated the course 3 times in 1 month. Because just when I would roll out, like, I've got it, something else changed. Oh, man. And I had to do it again and again and again. So it does happen. But, the reason we have this in our classes instead of a sterile demo environment is if you go through a class, which some vendors have courses that are demos, it always works. Well, it's not realistic. You end up going someplace and you're like, why is everything broken here? In class, it was fine. We want to show you the ugly part, how the sausage is made early. And so you're used to that. And we also want to teach you those skills, because you'll need them, when it's 2 a.m. and something breaks. So that's our approach. It does mean that it's a lot more effort. And there are trainers who teach the class, and they will actually send me stuff when they find it. So I can't say I'm doing it alone. I have wonderful people, but as far as writing new content, the majority of the course creation part, I still get to do that. The labs, I get help from people who find the problems and then send it to me, and I get to fix it.
Okay, cool. Now, let's see. Kevin said he's registered for the CKA and the CKAD.
Okay.
For both of those. So Kevin, this should come right in time for you. Now, one of the things that we haven't touched on, and I don't think we touched on this the last time, was what are you seeing standardized as far as like the sidecar proxy? Are you is Itch.io where everybody is just that's the standard now, or are you seeing like a hodgepodge or customer dependent?
Customer dependent. It's as a model, it works because you want your main container to be as lean as possible, and yet we all have our own needs. So I think the sidecar model is going to be very common. What is in that sidecar is, of course, going to be across the board. Everything you mentioned is TO, which was very popular at first, and it's actually, I've noticed the interest as everybody else is getting to service mesh. The interest in Istio has actually come down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
They were a little slow to execute. They were so not the fastest. Little black box. Nobody knows how it works inside, and they weren't terribly quick to change that. And people got frustrated, I think, and said, "Oh, shiny object," and they've run to like Linkerd is doing really well right now, which
Mm-hmm.
is interesting to me because as service meshes go, it really doesn't have any features. It's like, what do I get from this? It just works. Well, can I change anything? Not really. It just works. You don't have to do anything. Just install the software, you move on. And it's attractive. As somebody who has to fix stuff all the time, I'm kind of like, okay, I get that. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to me. But because there are other tools that you can use for metrics and to really
Right.
dig into your traffic. So it's like, okay, instead of trying to do everything, it just does the one thing really well. Let's go with that. So and it's modular as well. So Envoy is still popular, but other people are using it. So Contour, and I think I don't know if Alpine uses. No, they use Nginx now, but a lot of people in the space. So there's a lot of noise as well. But I'm seeing Linkerd is getting really a lot of traction. Contour and VMware shops. Istio is there, but it's not going anywhere. But it's not the powerhouse it once was as far as
Right.
services are concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question I probably have skated around is the container. All right. So Docker is now charging, and people went ahead and paid because their whole infrastructure is based on Docker.
Yep.
Right. So
Yep.
Docker knew like, hey, we can charge them, and they're not going to back out now because you're in it. So from your perspective, where did you see and everyone moving to? Do you see CRIO or what's your thoughts there?
I think as far as the tooling is concerned, people are lost. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen a breakout pattern because the Docker fiasco. I don't know if that's too much. People are like, gotta pay for it. It threw people, and like you said, they're like, well, let's just pay for it now. We'll punt and think of it later, and we'll work on it. If you're in the Linux space, Red Hat, there's a reason Docker went under and were bought by Mirantis. It's because Red Hat had a really organized way of taking them out. They said, we will replace everything you do with better, cheaper, faster things. So Podman is a tool that basically does everything the Docker command does. So you can build with it, you can run with it, you can do all of that. Separate from that would be the engine. So in Docker, it's one big 5 meg, binary that does everything. But with Cryo is what Red Hat leverages by default. So I would say if you were to do statistics in the US by different shops, what's the common tool for the engine? And I would say Cryo. But that's by number of shops because they're all Red Hat shops. So they're like, oh, well, we use what Red Hat says we use. And so you're kind of with it. If you were to look at number of installations, which would include all the cloud providers, I would say Containerd, because the Googles and the Amazons of the world, Containerd is easier, it's smaller, and it's faster, and it has no features, but that's fine. They're going to put their stuff on top anyways. So the number of instances, I would actually say Containerd is probably by number more common, but not by site, where there it still is Cryo. And Containerd is so small that one of the advantages, and we talk about this in a security course, it's really easy to put other tools like gvisor on top of. So now I can have a very small engine and a secure box that my container runs in. Whereas with Cryo, they're still kind of trusting your workloads okay. So if you have a model of I don't trust anybody, then I would actually do Containerd and gvisor as another option. And Kata containers are another way of looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the areas. So if you get into more of a secure environment, maybe financial, government, military, they're going to be looking at Containerd and gvisor and SEComp for the security reasons, and that it's lightweight. Where corporate America, corporate world is saying, we're a Red Hat shop, we're paying for the service anyways. If we pay for it, we got to use what they say to be in the matrix for support. So we're going to do cryo. The nice thing about Podman, it doesn't care. It's like, I'll run over here, I'll run over there. That's the beauty of this segmentation. So Red Hat really did, the hit that they did, they took out Docker and they did it really well. And I think once other people realize it, and I don't know if there's any plans. I don't do anything Windows. I'm Linux only, strangely enough, right? But if somebody ports Podman well to the Windows world, like in my clusters and when I support stuff, I actually alias the command Docker to Podman. So all my developers, if they type Docker run, they're like, well, the output's weird. I'm like, that's because you didn't actually run Docker. You actually ran Podman, didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Docker. That was Red Hat's goal. Like, let's swap everything out. Nobody will know. And then we've done our job and it's just cheaper for you. And that's what they did.
And we got a Red Hat person in the chat now. He posted a question for you. He said, what is the benefit of running Kubernetes on the endpoint? And I'm assuming he's saying, doesn't K3 still provide a control panel? There's still an OS. What resources left for the actual app?
Well, to some extent, I think that Kubernetes, it's being used for more than just orchestration. So the concept is I've always needed a control device that makes sure it's running and is checking on it. So even if, K3s, for example, very lightweight, but I'm getting more than just orchestration. I'm also getting somebody paying attention, and it itself is lightweight. So the whole model then changes to where I can watch one thing and it watches everything else for me, and it orchestrates and it does updates and it's extensible. So that's why it's, at first I used to think it was overdone. That I've gone through this before. I was working with Sun when Java came out, and Java everywhere, Java here, Java there, Java browser. And you're like, guys, it's, we don't have to try to put it everywhere. But they were like, no, it's our favorite thing. We put it everywhere. And there might be some of that happening now, but looking at what lightweight Kubernetes can do, and knowing that I get a monitoring tool, I get orchestration, I get easy upgrades and rollbacks from it, I get extensibility. Oh, okay. Now I start seeing why. Like, how do I use it more places? So that's been a change that I've made myself.
Question comes back is, why wouldn't you do that with Podman and Systemd?
Podman is great. It's a little bit bigger, and Systemd is absolutely much too big. So Systemd is great. I don't want to get into a flame war over Systemd. That's usually the way that people. This is how it all starts, and then somebody's throwing eggs at me. But the main complaint with Systemd is not what it does; it's what it takes to do it. And so basically, we're saying I don't need all those features. I just need this small subset of things, and so I want it to be lightweight, because if it's going to run on my Raspberry Pi or my car, I don't want to have anything wasted. So I want efficiency, but these 4 features that I need.
Gotcha. So now another topic that often comes up is, hey, I'm a beginner. I've never ever heard of Kubernetes. I don't even know what to do with it, or where I should start. I know where they should start, but I'm gonna let you run off where they should start, and also I think, and you can maybe point this out. What makes up Kubernetes, right? Like the picture, like the scheduler and so forth of Kubernetes. Like what all of the components of Kubernetes. But let's start with, I'm a beginner and I want to get started with this. Where should I start?
Well, okay, the corporate part of me says, of course, you're going to take a bunch of classes from the Linux Foundation, and that's the way to start. Buy more licenses. Now, for myself, when I'm trying to learn something, if I don't know where I'm going, I never learn anything. So I need to have a task. I need to know why I'm doing something. So for example, like for me to learn Raspberry Pi has been very difficult. And somebody said, you can turn on your coffee machine in the morning with this. Like, really? And so now I have a reason to spend, tens of hours studying this thing to make it work. So with Kubernetes, the way I would say it is, wouldn't it be nice to be able to deploy software and then update it and roll it back? And if it dies, it gets automatically restarted. If you need 10 of them, it's you can even do it automatically. And then if you only need one, you can go back to one. That kind of flexibility. Whatever your needs are that need to grow and shrink and change constantly, then use whatever that tool is. And I think that will help you understand Kubernetes to get that done. With developers, I'm not a good developer, but when people ask me, how do I get into doing that? I want to do this. I say start with a game on your iOS or your Android phone. Make a game that somebody else can play. Doesn't matter what it does. Make a simple game. You'll learn so much getting that game to work that you'll understand everything you need to know. And effectively, it's the same thing with Kubernetes. Figure out that one thing you want to deploy and scale up and scale down, whatever it is, web server, that's fine, whatever it is. When you see that, you'll have a need and it'll draw you through it with the online documentation, kubernetes.io. Start there. There's lots of other pages. I mean, it's just so much information on the internet. You'll get the tooling that you need and that fits into it. As far as the components, I guess it depends how in depth do you want me to go, because I can talk for hours about the components if you want.
I actually pulled up a screen of the different components, and I'm gonna get to your question, Rod. Let me go over these components real quick.
Sure.
I pulled these up because I just wanted people to understand, as you study, these components are going to keep coming up. And as you do interviews, these components are going to come up from the Kube Controller Manager, the Kube API, etcd. Is it still etcd in there?
It is. It is by default. You can swap it out for
all right. And this is from 2020. So let me know if this is wrong.
Nope. Still there. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. The only thing I would change about this graphic is the Cloud Controller Manager is optional and not there by default.
Okay, so we should have put an optional here.
Yeah.
All right, and the Kube API server and the scheduler, and then here will be, out here are your nodes, as you see right here, and then on those nodes you would have your Kube Proxy and your kubelet. Now, if you want to know more about what each one of these do, my recommendation is to go to edX, and there's I think it's a beginning Kubernetes course, right? And that one is that still free?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. And then in that course, they break down, from what I remember, it's been some years since I went through that course. They break down each one of these, each one of the actual components. So
in detail, exactly. That's right. Exactly. So, well, if you want, actually, can I share is that okay for me to share my screen?
Yeah.
You told me how to do it. I think I know how to do it, but let's see if I can actually do it. Share screen. And window PDF. Okay, is it coming through?
Yep.
Okay, so this is exactly from the book.
It a little, well, D can take us off the screen and make it bigger. Yeah.
Oh, I can make it. Oops, that's probably a little too big, huh?
Yeah.
Let me do this.
There we go.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so this is exactly what's in our. This is from the architecture chapter from our book. And over here, I'll just go through it real quick. I think it helps to see the traffic as it goes through. So on the left, we see kubectl or kubectl. It's really just an API call. It's a curl command. So our interaction, everything in Kubernetes is just an API call. And it's not elegant, but that's a common theme with Kubernetes. Is it simple? Does it work? Good enough. So that's just it. It's all API calls. Goes to the Kube API server. All arrows go here. So the whole point of Kubernetes, it actually follows the design that your application should. So I use this page quite a bit for people to know this is what you should emulate with your software. So our API server, what does it do? It handles the API calls. It doesn't actually do anything. Think of the person who answers the phone. So the guy who answers the phone in the company, say, I want to talk to the CEO. Well, let me connect you to support. They're the ones that manage where you actually get connected to. That's what the API server does. So everybody talks to the API server. And the way the Kubernetes works in general, nothing is assumed. Everybody asks everybody everything all the time. That's why you can throw it into a car. It's built that way. It's built with failure in mind. So everybody asks. They have what's called a watch loop or an operator. It's operator based. They ask the API server, what's new? Tell me what's new all the time. Over like every 5 milliseconds. I have to look up the timer, but it's all the time. It keeps asking. Everybody does. The API server then persists the state of everything into etcd. That's just a data store. So the truth of the cluster, what is in etcd. Only one person ever updates it. That's the API server. And everybody asks the API server what's going on. Okay? So that's the job of the API server. Just you call me, I'll connect you. I keep the official record, the notes of the meeting. That's etcd. Everybody else, what do they do? Up here, we have the Kube Controller Manager. That's where all your brain is. That's where your operators are, your watch loops. And they constantly ask what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, all the time. They say, what's the status and what's the spec? Okay, so 2 parts. Spec means this is what should be. So Kube Controller says, hey, what's the spec? Should I have a pod running? And API server asks etcd, should there be a pod running? And the answer comes back. Let's say the answer is yes, you should have a pod running. The spec says this should be running. A moment later, it says, do I have a pod running? So I should have one. Do I have one? And then it compares it. That's how it operates. So what should be and what is. If those match, wonderful. I don't have to do anything. 5 milliseconds later, I'm going to ask you again, what's my spec? What's my status? And compare it again, over and over again. Sounds silly. It's like answering a phone just in case your ringer's broken, like hello, but that's what we do over and over and over again. So the Kube Controller Manager there's all these different components. They're all asking for themselves over a lot of traffic going back and forth. It's a Delta FIFO shared informer queue to get detailed on it. Basically, we're constantly asking. If there's a difference, that's where operation comes. So I don't have a pod. I need to have a pod. I'll make one. And it tells the API server, make a pod. Okay, I'll let etcd know we need a pod running. Ask the scheduler, where should the pod run? And the only thing the scheduler does, so everybody's a microservice. They do just their one thing. Scheduler says, oh, well, of the nodes out here where you could run, go to 3 for whatever the algorithm is, whatever you're choosing by CPU, memory, just pod count, who knows, very configurable. And the only thing it returns is go to node 3. No other details, just this is my one job. I do one thing, this is it. So API server then sends it to Kubelet. Now you'll notice Kubelet actually runs everywhere. That's the actual heavy lifter. This is the agent that actually runs stuff. So Kubelet is what talks to Docker or Cryo or Containerd or whatever your engine is. That's why we can swap out our engines and nobody knows. So I could have been running Docker and I can swap it out with Cryo. Nobody knows because we don't even look that far. We just want that API call to go to the kubelet running on that node and it can handle it. In fact, my worker, I can have workers that are Windows and we don't care. As long as there's kubelet and he'll accept this API call, life is good. So the API server sends that spec file. Well, how does it get the spec file? Well, that's what the operator sent it. This pod should run to kubelet. It also sends a message for whatever networking is considered to everyone. And this is where we get flexibility. I don't care where I'm going to send this pod because everybody gets the network. So if it fails and needs to get restarted someplace else, they'll be ready for them. They already have the network ready to go. And so the Kube proxies, we leverage firewalls, IP tables, and or IPVS, which is a newer, more efficient version of IP tables. And that gets the network ready. Once all the resources are ready, kubelet tells Docker or Cryo or Containerd, start the container. And that's where you end up with your containers, wherever they are. Then they keep talking this whole time because every 5 milliseconds, that Kube Controller Manager says, how many pods do I have running? You got a pod running. Okay, how many should be running? Spec and status, spec and status, 1 and 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 1. When I change the configuration, I could say, I want 5 replicas. Okay, the spec changed. Got that message. A moment later, status, 5, 1, I better start 4 of them. And it does that and it goes through the same exact process. If it dies, one of them dies, same exact process. And because the scheduler's asked every time, if I have a worker fail, then I'll just reallocate all those nodes that are no longer giving me status to all my other nodes. As long as I have someplace to go, I don't care. That's just it. We don't care about what the stuff is. So that's kind of a quick run through. And you see how the cloud is grayed out there. That's helpful for dealing with other managers like Cloud Foundry or OpenStack or Rancher, where you need an API translator. So the APIs are coming from Rancher, and that's a proprietary API, and we want to translate that into an API that the Kube API server can understand.
Gotcha. I appreciate that breakdown. I hope that was part of the test. That's part of the test inside was it edX, when you go through like, hey, what do you do? That's part of it right there. So you can skip part of it if you pay attention and get cracking, right? So here's another question that I think GCP does this very well with their GKE clusters, like spinning them up, abstracting a lot of information from you. You're just deploying applications, right?
Yep.
And then you can set your watches, your logs, and so forth and so on. All right. Now, one of my questions is, what is the vanilla Kubernetes? There's a cost associated with standing up vanilla Kubernetes inside of, say, we did something in DigitalOcean, and now you want to have high availability with those clusters, whatever region, and on top of that, deploying your applications and high availability with the applications and your secrets manager that's included in that in a high availability. Like what have you seen people do in startups, or I wouldn't say startups, so just using vanilla Kubernetes? Like, are they ditching it? Because I know DigitalOcean has their own thing. They recently came out with that like about a year ago or something like that. Because people were just like, hey, we're spinning up Kubernetes clusters and trying to make it work. But like I know a lot of people that just want to spin up vanilla. They don't want paid nothing. They just want vanilla Kubernetes, and we're gonna make this work. But there's a cost associated with that.
But if you're willing to put the time and work in, which is what our class prepares you for, is you don't rely on anybody for anything. You can set it all up, and you're just paying for the cost of the servers running. So, ours costs something like 7 to 10 cents per hour for class, per node. We run a 2-node cluster in our class. So that's the low end of what you could do and do everything on your own. To a large extent, you're paying for convenience. It's like a valet parking. If you don't feel like walking for 10 minutes, you pay some money. And that's what DigitalOcean and Google and Amazon are making their margin off of. So, things like HashiCorp for dealing with secrets, they have a community tool that does most things, and it's free. So if you're willing to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to hassle with it for half a day, you could have really dynamic advanced secret management, for example, and Rook, which handles your storage, and you can run Ceph, and it's built into Kubernetes. So just costs to storage at that point. So everything can be done if you're willing to put the hassle into it. But where the Googles and Amazons, AWSs, and so forth make their money is a lot of startups. They don't want to pay IT staff because 24/7 means I have at least 5 staff, and 5 knowledgeable staff sitting around when I'm a startup. That's a lot to bear. And asking my developers to also do that job may not be successful. It'll be very expensive. So it's a great model if you're AWS, because it's far cheaper for me to just pay the extra 40%, whatever it is, for the convenience factor, for the valet factor of you just handle it for me. I'll consume those resources. I won't own anything. You'll own it all. I won't have really that much control. Although Amazon now has a cluster where you can actually do some control plane stuff and actually own a control plane now in Amazon. So that's kind of neat. But the idea being is that, like, load balancers, this is a primary where you pay a lot for a load balancer if you use like Google to do it, because they have a listener and it starts up automatically and X, Y, and Z. And people are like, ooh, wow, that's easy. And then I'll step them through how to use HA Proxy in about 20 minutes. And they go, well, that's so much cheaper. Why are we doing it? I'm like, because it was easy. And you click a button or it happens automatically. So it's about a convenience. You can do everything if you're willing to put in the time to set it up and do a little scripting. And our class, that's what we try to do. So this is how you use Helm. This is how you use in this class, the 458 I was showing you. We set up HA with HA Proxy. so that you can have that. And I talk about things like HashiCorp and Rook, and I'm trying to give you the open source tools so that you can do it for yourself, at least get started with it. If in corporate environments we don't always have the time to do that, but if you're as I like to joke, the top two tiers of every protocol stack: money and politics. How much does it cost, and who does it make look good? So if money is your number one thing, which it often is, and you have the time, you can do it all yourself. You're just paying for whatever resources you're actually using, meaning CPU, memory of an instance inside of Google or Amazon. But can you pay more? Absolutely. In fact, there is a whole project. The Linux Foundation has a whole project on this called FinOps. So the FinOps, and that's all about the cloud cost management. That even what was a great idea at all times, it's sort of like never getting your credit card statement, and everybody's like, just charge it, and then people are like, whoa. It would have been far cheaper if we had hired 5 admins than what we're spending on the cloud. So how is this possible? And it's because nobody had an idea of what they're actually spending. And if I'm Amazon, I don't want you to know either. It's just keep coming, bring your friends. So there's a whole project. So and FinOps is really popular right now, and for a reason. It's because so many companies really wish they knew what they're spending on the cloud, and saying, well, how do we analyze that? And I definitely like it. If I have a DigitalOcean account, and which I'm a big fan of DigitalOcean, if I'm looking at my Amazon costs and I look at DO, I'm like, well, wait a second, why is this so much cheaper and it's easier? Why aren't we just over here? And how do I move my stuff over there? And so those are areas that you can have huge savings. Just like any software vendor, if you have options when it comes time to re-up the contract, when you're like, well, company B said they'll give it to me for 20% off. What can you do for me? Well, I can give you 10% off. Well, right there, that ask, you save 10%. And if you think about it that way, per word, that's the biggest savings you'll ever have. And it's no effort at all. But you can only make that ask if you have options and you can really move and you don't even understand what you're spending. And that's where things like the FinOps project, I encourage people. It's a relatively new project for the Linux Foundation. Take a look at it. I believe it's finops.org, FINOPS.org. And it's, when you really think about it, a lot of it's not magic where you're like, oh, I never would have thought of that. It's more of having something where the principles are there, and it's an easy way of leveraging that information. And again, back to what I was saying, my mission is this evangelism. So that's why I'm like, this will help you. If you're in that environment where you don't even know what you're spending, this is the next thing to do. If you can gauge, should I be running it? Should I send my guys through Tim's class so they can do it? Or should we be paying Google to run our cluster for us and we just consume it? I only need developers. I don't need any admins or any infrastructure.
And I pulled that up, the FinOps page, about the 6 principles that you're sharing there. Teams need to collaborate. Business value of cloud drives decisions. Everyone takes ownership for their cloud usage, and that's a sticky subject there about everyone taking ownership, because what ends up happening is now you have to make sure you break down how a project is ran, like the cost to run that project and who's working on that project, and what is the customer's charge back for that, plus the actual gain. There's got to be some kind of gain for the company to run that, right? And
Absolutely.
then the FinOps reports should be accessible and timely. A centralized team drives FinOps and take advantage of the variable cost model of the cloud, which brings in a whole nother set of issues if you're talking about in the DoD space and what this looks like. What I'm seeing in the DoD space is pullback from the cloud now, because ran out there, everybody's moving to the cloud and they got the bill.
Yep. Exactly right. And they're like, well, we could have just bought this stuff and then we'd own it. And
right.
But that's you are actually paying for an admin team. You're just paying for part of it. and you're paying for somebody else's power, electricity, and all the same resources. You're paying for it and margin. So really, you're paying for the real cost plus 20, 30% at least. So if you look at it that way, if I'm a startup, I can't afford 5 guys. If I'm the government, I can afford 5 guys. It's better for me to have, 5 people, I should say, but I should have 5 people sitting there because it's cheaper than paying Google to have 5 people and then paying the margin on top of that. And that's the part, there's a reason that it's one of the leading profit centers for Amazon. It's not because they're always losing money. They're not doing anybody favors. So if you're big enough to have a data center, then you really should consider, should I do it on my own? And maybe some of the tax advantages change. So there's right now the tax laws are like, it's actually better to actually waste money because you make it back in taxes. But that doesn't help the government, for example, or the military, because we don't get tax, so we don't have that incentive anymore. So a lot of weird stuff, but that's where that FinOps can be handy because you know what's going into it, and you have to allocate everything. So it's not perfect. It's not a magic easy button, but it's sort of like there is that point of diminished returns. Big companies, they know exactly how much power they pay for electricity, but they don't calculate like this desk got 2 watts of power, that desk got 6 watts, so you owe us for it. There are some kind of overall cost just to be there that still ends up being quite a bit if you're a big company. And that this helps with narrowing it down, saying, let's cut off the big sections to understand what's going on. And we'll always have a small place that we just figuring that out is not going to make sense. But when you talk about data, keeping it there all the time, transferring it back, then you just go, wow, that's a lot of money. This is really expensive when we could have just had a disk here and it cost me just electricity. So understanding the real cost is huge. And all businesses need information to make agile decisions. And this is where stuff like FinOps and some of the other tools, Prometheus and Fluentd and so forth, that we have metrics to generate this. And again, if you're willing to spend the time to set it up, you don't have to pay anybody for it.
Gotcha. And my last question, because I know we ran over our time. My last question is, okay, so I go and get my CKA, my CKD, or my CKS exam.
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to do next? So what? Who cares, right? I got certified, right? What are my next steps? And I should preface this with what industries should I be looking in? Say we said cybersecurity, but let's say within the next year to next 2 years, what would you be sending people to, and what am I doing with once I pass this exam?
Well, the good news is when you get certified, you're in a great place. The jobs report, I don't know if you saw that. If you go to linuxfoundation.org, you can probably find it. Just came out. People are like 81% of new hires, people are looking for certification. Our certification are digital badges. Hiring people love the digital badges because everybody on their resume, anybody can type in a word processor and like, oh, I have a degree from MIT and I'm 10 feet tall. And they're putting a lot of stuff there. And a hiring manager doesn't necessarily know the technology, and it's tough for them to know. As a result, they hand up resumes to somebody, the more technical, and they say, this is wrong. It's a pain. So with those badges that we have, the certification badges, you click the button and it pops up, says, this person got certified at this time in this exact software. So that pile of resumes, you've made their life easy. Like, which ones do I hand over? The ones that I can easily verify are real. So we're finding huge responses to that. That jobs report, if I was looking for a job right now, I would be looking at that jobs report and going, okay, this is what I need to do. Because they talk to thousands of people about what do you want and what do you avoid. So it's great news for somebody trying to get a job. Certification, as far as industries, almost every single one of, name it, and they're looking for it because Kubernetes is going everywhere. I would say it's a good question. Around here, because I live in Austin, we do huge business, and we have everything from big companies to small companies. I'm seeing a lot of ask for small to mid-sized companies that are in the service space, whether they're making software, but I'm seeing a lot of stuff where they're just big enough that they need to have an IT staff, and they're like, okay, I don't just need Geek Squad anymore. I actually need to run a legit data center. And so, like for example, I saw like 3 different construction companies because construction is so big here in Central Texas that they're hiring Kubernetes admins because okay, we need this. We don't even know what we're asking for, but we need that. So those are the kind of areas that I think are going to be quite popular. Big companies will always need people. And so if I was brand new to IT and never worked, I would probably gravitate towards a big company, Oracle, IBM, maybe a big accounting company, a Accenture type place, mainly because you're going to be exposed to so much. You probably won't be paid very well, but it's just the way that works. Because they have so many people applying, like we can get rid of you, but spend a year there, and then you're going to know. I would say if you're attracted to an industry, it's probably good. So another big area here in Austin is games. So like Blizzard and so forth, they're here, and they're definitely embracing this big time. So though there's a lot of, if that's your industry, ironically, you don't actually get to play video games very much if you work for them, which is a bummer. Kind of bait and switch there, but I would actually, right now is a great time to know what you're doing in IT. I would just like look at where would I like to live or work, and you could probably go there. The government has some really neat stuff happening. So especially if you're eligible to get clearance, I've heard about some really neat stuff that I was
yeah, they got a lot of stuff from and this was a couple of years ago with the F-22s having Kubernetes on it, and that's still a thing. Drones, most definitely.
Absolutely.
That's where K3s comes in at on those drones. And then also to catch a drone as well too. So being able to detect that a drone is in the airspace, because we get a lot of drones flying illegally in airspaces. So they're ready to take them out, capture them, haul them in, track them down to the owner, so forth and so on. Another place where I've seen drones, we were at a government meeting, and I think it's Polestar. I think that's their official name, but they do logistics on cargo containers and so forth, and keeping up where cargo containers and ships are at. So one of the big things was if there are 2 cargo ships side by side, that means that they're unloading materials that shouldn't be coming into whatever country or whatnot. So they do this around the world. They keep up with logistics of that around the world. And so they're using AI and machine learning, and they're doing it at the edge, and they're using Kubernetes. And they were like, we need everything that you're talking about. We need all of that. And so they're starting to build out their American team, because they're overseas team, but they're starting to build out their American team here in Florida. I think they're also in Austin, and don't quote me, I think they're in California too. Anywhere there's ships coming in, that's where they're at. And I brought up the actual job report that you were talking about. I hope everyone can see this. Let me blow this up some. That may be too big. All right. So cloud and container technologies, these is 2021's hottest skill sets. Linux development and administration. That's what we do. We're here. We're women in Linux. This is what I talk about all the time. Network technologies. I'm going to say this. These 2 skills right here are going to be with you for life if you do anything in terms of Linux administration and so forth. These are just life skills. Like, you're just going to always have these skills. Those are, again, I call those your basics, your baseline skills. And then DevOps practices, and then security practices. Each and every one of these things we talk about in Women in Linux. We talk about containers. We talk about Linux administration. We talk about network technologies. We talk about building your own home lab, DevOps practices, and security practices. This is just going to be throughout. Like, these are your skills. And these skills that you see here, I have had those skills forever. They're not going to change. Just have them again in your toolbox. what's not said from this when you're looking at this is DevOps practices. Well, what does that actually mean? What are they actually saying when they're talking about DevOps practices? So you have to get into the meat and potatoes of that. Networking technologies. I can go on for forever when we're talking about Cisco Dev. We're talking about automation with networking with Ansible. What does that mean from a Kubernetes perspective when we're talking about network technologies? What does it mean from a data center perspective when we're talking about this? And let me see if I can bring this up real quick. Because it was something that I saw this afternoon that I thought was just I'm trying to reach out to this lady to talk a little bit more about this, but it was, let me see, I was down here. um it is let me pull this over here so you all can
While you're
see.
looking it up, I was going to say DevOps and DevSecOps. I've been
Yep.
hearing so much about that in the last month.
Yep.
It's you never know. Is like, did an article come out and everybody's talking about it? But it might be something. I would keep an eye on that as well, as far as like job to get.
Oh yeah,
It
it's huge.
developed. Yeah,
DevSecOps it's not going anywhere, right? People are ramping up and from the perspective of, hey, we need somebody to come in. I was just talking to a guy today. The location is in Colorado, and we got to talking about numbers, and I tossed a number. He was like, "Well, that was a little under what I was thinking of, but here's what we're thinking." And I was like, "Well, that really works for me, right?" Yeah. So, but the DevSecOps that's still it's encompassing now. Kubernetes is just a default thing that you need to have.
yes,
You just need to have that, right? You just
excellent.
need to understand Linux. You just need to understand it. You need to understand containers. It's one of those things. I said it before, I say it again. I feel like DevOps or DevSecOps is equal to the old sysadmin to me.
I agree. Absolutely.
It's just what it is. It's like it's not something you didn't do already, right? So this article that I'm showing here it says how Facebook and Google use sonar ships and gigantic water plows and divers to lay thousands of undersea internet cables around the globe. And they were talking about how they have like 30 to 50 people working on this ship, and how they keep up with the ship and how they lay their cables and the time that it takes, and doing soil samples and so forth. And I just found it interesting because this is actually in another article they talk about the move to Africa. And in that article they're talking about laying 28 the first pipeline they're laying 28,000 miles of this. So, as we continue to grow and talk about data centers and what's going on around the world, right? With China moving into Africa, what does that mean with the United States and Facebook and employees? What does that look like? Like just kind of broadening that horizon of where your skill sets can take you is really what I wanted to point out, because you there's no way you can't tell me there's some AI machine learning that's not on this boat, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's kind of cool. That's a cool project. But you're right. It's become so common, and it is the sysadmin of before. I totally agree. And that's
Right.
cool. I'm going to read that article now.
Yeah. Yeah, go check it out. There's another one that the one lady, let me give you her name. That her name is Jane Stowell. She is the strategic negotiator for global infrastructure at Google. The strategic negotiator for global infrastructure at Google, right? So that's what she does. She plans around the world for everything. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. That is
All right.
cool.
And then let me see. Yeah, I'll post that link. Let me do that right now. Well, I got it right here. I'll give it to D, and D can post it right there. All right. So, Tim, it has been an honor. I'm gonna make sure I got all my everybody comments. Everybody loved the interview. Vladimir, what's going on? He's our go guy. Let me see, make sure. Oh yeah, it says. Oh, you were saying from earlier, Rod, about all the activity it takes up resources, etcd, schedule, logging, etc eats input, output, and memory. That's why I can't wrap my head around benefits of K3s on the endpoints. Well, I think that's what Rancher is doing too, right? Rancher is doing K3s, right? Is that a Rancher project? The K3s, is that Rancher's project?
Yeah, I think it is. I'm trying to remember who came up with. Yeah, I think they started it. Yeah, that's a good question. Where did it came from? But um, yeah, it's because it's like a binary is what you're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
instead of. So it's lighter weight. Doesn't have all the bells and whistles. So you're giving up power for speed and size.
Right. All right. So I asked anybody did they want to come up. Nobody said anything. So we're gonna go with nobody wanted to come up. But I appreciate everybody that came and supported us today. I also appreciate you and taking the time to drop your wisdom and your knowledge and giving people the idea of what's going on. And I'll make sure I post that report as well in our Slack group. And we'll have to get together. I know we're supposed to link up and talk about SE Linux. You let me know when is a convenient time for you to discuss that and what you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk to you more because security's big right now. So maybe Monday or Tuesday we can get 15 minutes and chat.
Yep, that works. Just let me know. Shoot me over a time, and I'll make sure I'm available,
Thank you.
and we can go from there. All
Sounds
right,
good.
everybody, we appreciate you for sticking around. We did a long interview yesterday, and Tim, I know we took more than your time than what's necessary. It's Friday though, Tim.
It's true. It's true.
It's
The
Friday,
beer
so
calling my name. Yep.
so go have that beer. I'll let you know when I'm in Austin. We can link up.
Please do.
You can take me to your favorite beer
Yes,
spot
absolutely. All of
and
them. I will take you to all of them.
all of them. Okay, all of them, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you
All
very
right,
much,
now.
dude.
All right, now y'all be safe.
Thank you.